Awesome. So today we are going to jump into Cardiophys, heart stuffs. This lecture is going to be kind of split up two different ways. First part will be about the heart. Second part will be about the blood vessels. Okay. This lecture here is kind of dependent on the anatomy. So we're going to do a rough anatomy overview and get some working ideas behind it. So I would say, like, definitely use this time here to brush up on your anatomy if it's been a little while. Okay. All right. So your heart. Of the heart, you need to know a few different structures. You need to know the chambers, you need to know the valves, and the great vessels. So we're going to walk you through that, okay? So blood is going to come in first to the vena cava. Vena cava. Okay, now I don't discern between the superior and the inferior. It's just above the heart or below the heart. Vena cava is good enough for me. Okay. Then we're going to enter this little spot right here, or sorry, right here. That is your right atrium. Okay. From the right atrium, we're going to go through this valve. So actually, let me draw some arrows here. Then we're going to go through this valve. That is the tricuspid valve. Okay. From anatomy, I don't know if you guys learned the trick, right? You have to try it before you buy it. That's why it's the tricuspid valve first. Then we enter the right ventricle. Heads up, I abbreviate ventricle as vent, just because I'm lazy, sorry. Then we're going to go up this part here. This is the semilunar pulmonic valve. Okay. Then we're going to go into the pulmonary artery. Then we're going to hit the lungs. Easy enough. We get some nice oxygen, come back from the lungs. We're going to enter the pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins. Then we're going to hit the left atrium. So it's kind of from here. And then we're going to go through the bicuspid valve. However, only anatomists use the term bicuspid. In the medical field, you guys will refer to it as the mitral valve. Mitral valve. So heads up, guys, you will never see bicuspid on a quiz. You'll never see it on an exam ever again. It'll only be known as the mitral valve. Okay, so just heads up about that terminology here. We go from the mitral valve, we enter the left ventricle. Then we get into the semilunar aortic valve. Then we're finally going to get into the aorta. And we hit the rest of the body. Okay. So I know this looks daunting here, but we're going to practice it a few times. Here's me kind of giving you guys a serious hint. You need to be able to draw a drop of blood through the heart. So you need to know what structures go with the structures to which structures. Forwards and backwards. The reason is because patho, when things don't go right. Okay, we're going to practice with it. So just giving you a heads up, you need to have a working anatomy, working knowledge of the anatomy of the heart. Okay, so this is what I do because I'm not much of an artist. If you guys can't tell, this is how I kind of simplify things. Okay, here's your heart. You got 4 chambers, easy enough. Your heart, the sides get switched. Okay. All right, so blood is going to enter into this chamber right here. What's that chamber called?
Right atrium.
Perfect, right atrium. Then we're going to go through this valve. What's that valve going to be called?
Tricuspid.
You have to try it before you buy it. Okay. So we go from the right atrium through the tricuspid into the right ventricle. And now we're going to leave the heart. We have to leave through this valve right here. That is your semilunar pulmonic valve. Okay. Then we're going to hit the lungs. Cool. Get some nice oxygen. And then we're going to come back to the heart and enter which chamber?
The left ventricle.
Oop. Left
Atrium.
Atrium, yeah.
atrium. Atrium's up top, ventricle's on the bottom, right? So then we're going to go through that valve. And what is the name of this valve that separates the left atrium from the left ventricle?
The semilunar.
The mitral valve.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah, because here's how I kind of remember it. Your tricuspid and your mitral valve are internal valves. They're inside of the heart. If you want to leave the heart, you have to go through a semilunar valve. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of hard to see that picture above. That's why I kind of simplify it. So you go through your mitral. Ooh, that's not how you spell it. You go through your mitral valve, the internal valve here, to go into your left ventricle. Then you're going to get out of your semilunar aortic valve. Go to your body. Okay, and then rinse and repeat. So obviously we didn't draw everything on here, but let me say like need to know. Chambers, valves, and the great vessels. Okay, there's 4 each. I don't know if that helps. My recommendation, draw this out a few times on a spare sheet of paper. Draw it out on a whiteboard. Draw it a few times. You will get the hang of it. You don't need to worry about it. Okay. Especially, you know, on a scrap sheet of paper if I was taking an exam. So just be, again, have this working knowledge here. We're going to keep practicing with this. Okay. All right. So taking a look here, a couple of key terms. I totally forgot that I changed the slides. Key terms here is diastole. Diastole translates to as relax. Therefore, systole is the opposite. Systole translates to contract. Okay. during diastole, your heart is relaxing. That is a false statement. Okay. How your heart works. Okay. How your heart kind of works. You have your atria up here and your ventricles down here, right? They are always opposite of one another. If your atria are contracted, your ventricles are relaxed. If your ventricles contract, your atria relax. They're always out of phase with one another. Okay. So taking a look at this slide here, whenever you use the term diastole by itself, that refers to these structures right here. These structures are relaxing. What are those structures?
The ventricles.
The ventricles. So diastole means ventricular relaxation. Okay. So what I'm getting at is in the medical field, if someone says patient's heart is in diastole, you instantly know what structures are relaxing. Ventricles, right? What structures are contracting?
Atriums.
The atria, yeah. Okay. So that means during systole, what do you instantly know what's going on with the heart?
The atria are going to relax.
Atria are relaxing, and what is contracting?
The ventricles.
Awesome. Okay. So again, whenever you see diastole or systole by itself, the default is the ventricles. If I want to talk about the atria, if you want to talk about the atria, you would have to say atrial diastole, atrial systole. Okay. So again, if you ever see diastole or systole by itself, you default to the ventricles. So this is going to be a little bit of foreshadowing here. Excuse me. All right, so the right side of the heart handles pulmonary circulation, blood to the lungs. Therefore, what kind of blood do we find on the right side of the heart? What kind of blood do we find on the right side of the heart?
Deoxygenated.
Perfect. I'm going to say deoxy blood. Therefore, on the left side, systemic, that's going to be oxy blood. Okay. So here's a nice little flow chart. I don't actually like this flow chart. Some people do, some people don't. Up to you. All right. So a little bit about the different layers of the heart. The mediastinal cavity. This is just where the heart sits. Okay, nothing too crazy there. The different layers, we're going to start with the pericardium. Does anyone know what peri means? Like pericare?
Behind.
Behind or around. Yeah. So this is around the heart. Okay. So the pericardium is basically just a fibrous sac that prevents overfilling. Prevents overfilling of the heart. I'm not really concerned with the two subpoints there. Then, therefore, myocardium. Myocardium, What does that translate to?
Muscle of the
Mhm.
heart.
Perfect. Muscle of the heart. What's the one job your heart has to do? What's the one job your heart has?
Pumping blood.
Mhm. Pump, absolutely. Therefore, this is going to be the thickest layer. Okay. Endocardium. Very straightforward. It's the inside of the heart. Okay. So just showing you that the pictures there. Again, it should make sense why the myocardium is the thickest, yeah? That's the one job your heart has to do. You need a lot of muscle. All right, so you got your different chambers there. All right, talking about these heart valves. Atrioventricular valves. We call these AV valves. So these are the valves in between your atria and your ventricles. Okay. A little bit of review. Tricuspid, right or left? The tricuspid sit between the right atria and ventricle or the left atria and ventricle?
Right.
Tricuspid will be right. Therefore, mitral will be left. Okay. Your semilunar valves, so I call them SL valves. These are the valves out of the heart. They lead out of the heart. So if you want to leave the heart, you need to go through the semilunar valves. Pulmonic semilunar valve tells you where it's going. Pulmonic semilunar valve, you know it's going to the lungs. Therefore, right or left?
Right.
Aortic semilunar, therefore you know is left. Okay. Now, because of the way the heart kind of functions, these valves are always opposite of one another. They're always opposite of one another. So if your AV valves are open, your semilunar valves are shut. If one is open, the other one is closed. If the other one is closed, the other one's open. Why? Or for what purpose? Why do we have valves in our heart? What do they do?
Prevent backflow.
Perfect. Prevent backflow. Okay. So you need to be able to tell me which stage of the cardiac cycle we're in, depending on if the valves are open or closed. Huh? All right, so taking a look here. These big ones right here, these are your AV valves. So in situation A, your AV valves are open. And up top, your semilunar valves are closed. So let's kind of think about this. Here's your heart. So here my AV valves are open and my semilunar valves are closed. Where's blood going?
Into the heart.
Into the heart, into the ventricles. So if you notice, we are filling our ventricles. Do you want to fill your ventricles while they are relaxing or contracting?
Relaxing.
Therefore, which stage of the cardiac cycle are we in? Diastole or systole?
Diastole.
Perfect. So during diastole, your AV valves have to be open. Your semilunar valves have to be closed. Okay, so if we apply the same logic on the other side, systole, AV valves are closed, but your semilunar valves are open. Question I have for you is why? Why during systole do the AV valves need to be closed? Why during systole do the semilunar valves need to be open?
Because you need to take the blood in the ventricles and oxygenate it.
Yep, that's one part of it.
Prevent
That's
backflow.
prevent backflow. The blood is going to go both places, either to the lungs or to the body. Right? So what I'm getting at here is during systole, AV valves need to be closed to prevent backflow. Your semilunar valves need to be open to let blood out of the heart. Okay. So I'm going to scroll back up because those pictures earlier were a little bit better drawn. So this really kind of helps explain what's going on here. Diastole, my ventricles are relaxing. Notice my AV valves are open. Why? What am I trying to do with diastole?
Fill the ventricles.
Nice. To fill those ventricles. Here, notice my AV valves are shut, but now my semilunar valves, they're the ones in the center here. My semilunar valves are open. Why?
To get blood to the rest of the body.
I'm going to say to eject blood out of the ventricles. Nice thing about the cardiac cycle, there's only two steps, diastole and systole. Okay. Either your ventricles are relaxing or they're contracting. Again, get used to drawing the simplified drawing a lot. It kind of helps, especially if I have like a multiple choice question saying during systole, which statement is correct? Pulmonic valve is open, the aortic valve is closed, tricuspid valve is closed, et cetera, right? So have this kind of working knowledge here. All right, so talking about your coronary arteries. This is blood that feeds the heart. So this is how the heart feeds itself, oxygen, nutrients, okay, via the coronary arteries. Now, of all of these, the only one you need to know is the left anterior descending artery. Okay, so you don't need to know these ones. You don't need to know the circumflex, don't need to know the collateral. You need to know about LADA. LADA is the main supply for the left ventricle. Main blood supply for the left ventricle. Okay. In fact, the reason why you need to know this, if LADA ever becomes obstructed, this creates what's called a widowmaker heart attack. Widowmaker heart attack. It is the worst type of heart attack somebody can suffer. Okay, so if LADA becomes obstructed, what's the consequence? What if I get a blood clot in my left anterior descending artery? What's going to happen?
You're dead?
Why?
I don't
There's
know
no
if this-
blood feeding the heart.
There's no blood feeding the heart, particularly the left ventricle, right? If my left ventricle is not getting any more blood, is it still contracting?
No, and then the body's not getting any blood.
The left ventricle is the only chamber that pumps to the body. If LADA gets obstructed, no more blood for the left ventricle, no more blood to your body. Other types of heart attack, you still have some minimal blood going to your body. LADA is the absolute worst. With a widowmaker heart attack, we're talking about death within give or take a few minutes. Okay, so that's why I'm highlighting that one there. Okay, your left anterior descending artery, LADA, is the main supply for that left ventricle. You do not want that getting blocked at any point. Okay. So this is just showing you that LADA, right? Main blood vessel feeding the left ventricle. Coronary veins. This is just going to return used blood to the right atrium. All right, so the great vessels, 4 of them, superior and inferior vena cava connect to which structure? So what chamber do your vena cava connect to?
Right atrium.
Perfect. Atrium. Your pulmonary artery, that's going to be connected to your lungs. Okay. Pulmonary veins bringing blood back. That's going to be left atrium. Aorta goes to your body. Okay, a little bit of a side note here. Veins versus arteries. What kind of blood do veins carry?
Unoxygenated or deoxygenated.
You are correct 99% of the time.
Pulmonary
This is-
veins are oxygenated. Sorry. go ahead.
Yeah, you're good, you're good. Normally veins carry deoxygenated blood except at the heart. Okay, be careful. Instead of thinking one carries oxygenated, the other one carries deoxygenated, veins, they carry blood to the heart. Veins are always bringing blood back to the heart. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Okay, so just heads up about that. Yes, veins typically carry deoxygenated blood, but not all the time. Okay, because in this case here, your pulmonary veins are carrying oxygenated blood. All right, so just a little recap here. Your cardiac cycle, 2 steps, diastole and systole. What does diastole mean?
Ventricular relaxation.
Nice. Vent relax. Therefore, that's vent contract. What about your atria? During diastole, what are your atria doing? Or what state are your atria in?
They're contracting.
They're contracting. So we would see during diastole, we would see atrial systole or contraction. Therefore, we would see atrial diastole. Cool. Now the hard question is why? What was the purpose? What was the purpose of diastole? What is the purpose of atrial systole? Why do you want your ventricle?
Diastole is to bring blood into the heart, into the ventricles.
Nice. I'm going to say to fill the heart with blood. Actually, let me not say heart, I'm going to say vent. To fill vents with blood, your ventricles. Therefore, systole, what's the purpose there?
Push blood either into the body or the lungs.
Nice, yeah. To eject blood out of the ventricles. Very good. And so this is what I'm talking about, like in terms of example questions. During systole, which valves have to be open? During systole, which valves have to be open?
Your semilunar.
The semilunar valves. So semilunar pulmonic, semilunar aortic. During diastole, which valves have to be closed?
Semilunar.
Semilunar. Yeah, very good. Okay. Draw it out a couple of times. Draw that simplified drawing I showed you guys. Draw it a couple of times. Draw it in diastole. Draw it in systole. You'll see these valves. Okay. Very good. So, ta-da. All right, so this slide here, let me say you do not need to know these numbers. Just trying to illustrate a point here. Your left ventricle has to generate 90 to 140 millimeters of mercury versus your right ventricle only has to generate maybe 30. Why? Why does the left ventricle have to work so much harder than the right ventricle?
Because it's pumping blood to the rest of the body.
Okay, I agree. This left ventricle here is to the body. Let me flip the question. Why does the right ventricle not need a lot of pressure? Why do we only need 30-ish millimeters of mercury out of the right ventricle?
Does it have to do with the oxygen level?
Kind of, that does kind of play a role. Where's the right ventricle pumping to?
It goes to the lungs, which are like the heart's next door neighbor. It's right there.
Yeah, they're right next to one another. So we don't really need that much force. But Madeline, good hunch though, because we'll talk a little bit about it. Oxygenation actually changes how well you can contract. That's more of patho, but that's a good shot. Oh boy, action potentials. Okay, so nothing really too crazy here, I promise. We're not going to go crazy with the action potentials. Just again, know that your heart is sensitive to which electrolyte?
Potassium.
Awesome. Okay. The conduction system here, this is the wiring of the heart. Just need to know maybe a couple of things. First up, your SA node. This is known as the pacemaker of the heart. Okay. So I know Halloween is over, but here's a thought experiment. Okay. You guys ever see like Indiana Jones? I believe it was the Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a scene where some dude gets his heart ripped out and you can see it beating outside of his chest. True or false? Would that actually happen? Would your heart beat outside of your chest?
No. Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Your heart is crazy. Your heart will beat outside of your chest. Your heart will beat without even your brain telling it to. Here's another weird fact. You know this severed beating heart? If I cut it into 14 different pieces, put it into 14 different jars, would it still beat? Yeah. You'd have 14 chunks of heart beating on its own. Your heart has the ability to cause itself to contract by itself. It doesn't need anything to tell it to beat, okay? If you were to take out a single cell, put in a petri dish with like electrolytes and nutrients, it'll contract on its own. Your heart is so friggin' cool. This is what the SA node does, okay? It gets everybody synced together. So take, for example, there are 15 of us right now, right? You guys all have a watch. You all know what time it is? Cool, cool. Who set the time for when lecture starts? Yeah, so in this situation, you guys are all capable of doing your own thing, but here I coordinate us all together on the same page at the same time. That's what your SA node does. It's a pacemaker. It tells everybody like, okay, let's go now, okay? Your AV node, there's a delay between, there's a delay between your AV node, or sorry, between the SA to the AV node. This allows for vent filling. Okay. There's a delay between the SA node to the AV node just to allow the ventricles to completely fill. Then you have the bundle of His, or His bundle. Sounds kind of funny. This basically travels middle of the heart. Left and right Purkinje fibers. This is going to stimulate muscle to contract. All right, so just kind of taking a look at a picture here to kind of help us out. That right there, that's your SA node. That's your pacemaker. That's telling everyone to be synced together. This right here is your AV node. Okay, when I send a signal to beat from the SA node to the AV node, there's a delay to allow my ventricles to fill. Okay. Now, I still don't know why I haven't changed this picture. The bundle of His runs down the septum of the heart. Okay, the bundle of His runs down the septum of the heart, so right in the middle. And then what happens is your bundle bifurcates. Keyword here, bifurcates. Bifurcates. What does bi mean? Bifurcates, so it means two, it splits into two. Why? Why is it important that we bifurcate instead of just having two separate wires this whole time?
Because they need the same like start from the SA node so that it all works together.
Yeah. This bifurcation allows the left and the right ventricles to contract at the same time. Okay, basically I'm going to send one signal and then the left and the right are going to get the signal at the same exact time. So we know that they're going to contract. That's what I was talking about like earlier in the lecture, how your left and your right, they're coordinated. Okay. All right. So because we talked about action potentials, I'm not going to really dwell on it too much here. The only thing that's new is this refractory period. This is a period of rest, where we cannot fire another action potential. So don't overthink this one here. Your heart has to rest. Why?
To allow it to fill.
To allow it to fill, absolutely. And let's think about like running. Okay, let's mention sprinting. What happens if you move your legs too fast?
They tire out way
They're gonna
fast.
tire out, and
I would fall.
They
yeah,
get
I would
sore.
eat shit hard. Exactly. This is the refractory period. It allows rest and it allows timing. So the refractory period prevents heart attacks. Okay. So I'm going to say allows for proper coordination. Okay. We need the left working together with the right. We need the atria working in opposite of the ventricles. Okay. So the refractory period is kind of important. All right, an electrocardiogram or an EKG. Some people have started calling it an ECG. I disagree with that. I say don't do that. EKG sounds better than ECG because with an ECG that sounds like an EEG, and that can get easily confused. So just all I'm saying is I call it an EKG. All right. Now an EKG only measures the heart's electrical events. An EKG only measures the heart's electrical events. Okay, so it measures things like depolarization, repolarization, etc. Does an EKG measure muscle contraction? No. Muscle contraction, that's a muscular event. Okay, so what I'm getting at is if you see somebody's EKG strip, can you say exactly that's what's happening? Or let me say, you get some patient's EKG strip. Can you tell if there's some contractility issue? No, you can only see the signals, the electrical signals saying contract. You don't actually know if the muscles are contracting or not. Okay. Automaticity and rhythmicity, just kind of vocabulary here. This is the ability to generate its own action potentials. Okay. As I had mentioned, does your heart need your brain to tell it to beat? Does your heart need your brain to tell it to beat? No, because of automaticity. The heart can generate its own action potentials. Doesn't need your brain. Rhythmicity, This is the ability to repolarize after depolarizing. Okay, i.e., your heart can set its own rhythm. It can set its own rhythm for contraction and relaxation. Automaticity and rhythmicity. These are two just unique properties of the heart. So now we're going to get into EKG stuff. You need to be able to interpret an EKG. Okay, now let me kind of specify this here. No, I'm not going to give you an EKG printout and ask you to read it. I'm going to be asking you more like multiple choice questions, kind of like, what does this wave mean? What does that wave mean? Between which waves does this happen, or whatever? You will not be responsible for abnormal EKGs. So all I'm saying is right now, I need you to focus on how an EKG works for a healthy person. Okay, you're going to get into abnormal EKGs like with electrolyte imbalances in MedSurg 2. Okay, so something else, what I would recommend, you need to know 5 things on an EKG trace. You need to be able to tell me 5 things off of an EKG trace. You can write this in whatever order you want. This is the order I prefer because there's a logic to it. Okay, so first thing you need to be able to tell me is the wave and its name. You need to be able to label the wave and the name. And then let's see, let's go. Yeah, let's go traffic light. Okay, you need to tell me the electrical events, i.e., you need to tell me atrial and ventricular depot and repo. Next, you need to be able to infer the muscular events. Atrial, ventricular contraction. You need to tell me what the heart sounds are. Heart sounds, there's 2 of them, S1 and S2. S1 is lub, S2 is your dub. Kind of give you guys a hint here. S1, this is when your AV valves close. When your AV valves slam together, that sound is lub. S2 is your semilunar valves closing. Okay. Finally, you need to tell me which stage in the cardiac cycle we are in. Diastole or systole. Okay. So these are the 5 things you should be able to tell me from an EKG. Now, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to draw it. You pick whatever option that you like. So with the first EKG, flat line, hill, flat line, trench, mountain. Actually, let me lower that a little bit. Trench, mountain, trench, flat line, Kansas, Nebraska. Did you guys actually hear that they actually proved, I think it was, yeah, they actually proved that Kansas on a geological scale is actually flatter than a pancake? Legitimately, Kansas has no elevation. All right, so step one, we're going to label our waves, okay? So you might remember from physiology, your QRS complex. The first wave is the P wave, and the last wave is the T wave. How on earth will you remember that? It's alphabetical. Don't overthink it. P, Q, R, S, T. Okay. So that's step one. Pretty easy here. Step two. Okay, we were saying label the electrical events. Remember, your EKG measures electrical events. These waves mean that there's electricity signals going on, okay? So the P wave is going to be the first electrical event. So let's think about with your heart, the first electrical event, do you want that to go to your atria or to your ventricles?
Atria.
We want it to go to the atria. So what I'm saying is the first electrical event should be atrial depolarization. Okay. Your QRS complex. This is the most electrically violent event. That means that's going to be your ventricles depolarizing. So vent depot. Okay. So what comes after depolarization in an action potential? What happens after depolarization?
Repolarization.
Repolarization, perfect. So that means my T wave must be vent repolarization. If you depot, you must repo. Which one are we missing?
Is it hyperpolarization?
Yes, but we're missing
Just-
something.
Repolarization.
We're
Atrial.
missing, yeah. Very good, guys. Atrial repolarization. Yeah, we are definitely still missing hyperpolarization, but it doesn't show up on the EKG trace because we're going from rest to rest. There's no electrical change there. That's why hyperpo doesn't really show up.
For the QRS thing, is it so violent because there's two things happening at once, or because the main thing is ventricular and those are so much larger?
The ventricles are just so much larger. You're hearing somebody scream like, contract the ventricles. And you have somebody in the corner like, and relax your atria, please. So you just don't really hear, you don't actually see the atrial repo because the signal to contract is so much stronger and your ventricles are also, you called it, so much bigger. Okay, so those are your electrical events. Now let's talk about your muscular events. Depolarization is the signal to say contract. Repolarization is the signal to say relax. So between which two waves would we have atrial contraction?
P and Q?
Yeah, depot, again, depot is the signal to say contract. So we're going to start contracting at some point. Again, will we see this on the EKG? No, we need to infer this, okay? And if repo is the signal to relax, it's going to stop right around there. It's atrial contraction. Okay. So then question for you guys. Where do my ventricles contract? Where would my ventricles contract?
Between
I agree. Oh, I totally messed up my color scheme. Damn it. Sorry, guys. All right, so that was the muscular events. Now, let's talk about your heart sounds, okay? S1 happens right in the middle, your lub, okay? Right at kind of the R wave. So let's think S1 is lub. That is when your AV valves are closing. Your AV valves are closing. Why is it important that we close the AV valves in between atrial contraction and ventricular contraction? Why is it important to have?
Backflow.
Yeah. If my AV valves are open here and my ventricles contract, blood's going to go backwards. That's no good. Okay. And then S2 is your dub. That's when your semilunar valves close. Okay. So full disclaimer, guys, you do need to know your heart sounds because that's going to be a thing in assessment. And Lindsay, she's going to get into S3 and S4. One step at a time. Right now, I just need you to know how this works. So just saying you'll see this as well in health assessment and elaborate on it. Okay. So last part then, because I've totally screwed up my colors. To the left of S1, which stage of the cardiac cycle am I in? Notice there's a hint for you.
Diastole?
I'm in diastole because my atrias are contracting. Therefore, my ventricles must be relaxing. See, so I don't know if you guys noticed, but yeah, that's why I like this order, because it kind of logically builds off of itself. Therefore, on to the right, that's systole. So I can ask you between which waves do we see atrial contraction between, or what does the T wave represent? Where does the S1 have to be? After which wave does S2 have to happen? So all I'm saying is, hey guys, get used to drawing this. You're going to see it. You're going to make it more complicated in health assessment and even more complicated in MedSearch 2. Okay, so get to know kind of like the basis. Now, the second way I'm going to show you guys how to draw it, up to you. A lot of students typically like the second way a little bit better because it's less cluttered. All right, so starting right off the bat here, P, Q, R, S, T. All right, so what event did P represent?
Atrial depolarization.
Atrial depot, nice. Sorry, I'm going to change it up just a little bit. Atrial depot, awesome. QRS, what's going on there?
ventricular depolarization and atrial repolarization.
Nice. Vent depot and atrial repo. Last electrical event must be
Vent repolarization.
yeah, vent repo. Nice. Okay. So between P and Q, between depot and repo, we know we see atrial contraction. Between S and T, therefore, we would see vent contraction. That's S1. That's S2. And finally, diastole and systole. So you can use either drawing, whatever one you want. I like the first one better just because I'm kind of an eclectic mess. But students typically like this one because it seems less noisy. So there's your nice little trace. S1 being lub, S2 being dub. Just reiterating here. Okay, this is the closing of the AV valves. That's closing of the semilunar valves. Okay. Ta-da! This is actually kind of cool. We'll get back to that. I'll actually put it up during break because it's actually kind of really soothing to watch. All right. So this last slide here, I promise we'll take a break. So your heart doesn't need your brain to beat, correct? But your brain can influence. Your brain can say like, hey, beat faster. That's your sympathetic nerves. So if you activate your sympathetic nerves, what will happen to heart rate? Yep. Increase in the heart rate. Parasympathetic will decrease your heart rate. Okay. Again, norepinephrine, epinephrine, same thing. You can use either one. Okay. Cool. So your heart can be affected by your brain, but so can your blood vessels. And that's where we're headed after a break. That was a good chunk of material. So after break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about blood vessels. If I were you, I would say get a handy little calculator. You can use the calculator on your phone as well, but you might need a little bit of a calculator for the second part. It's not terrible, I promise. Okay, so this is that animation I was talking about here. I don't know how they did it, but they made a nice like stop motion picture. You can see your AV valves working together and opposed to your semilunar valves. Y'all, your heart is friggin' weird. I don't know. I'll leave it up during break. Like I said, I kind of find it a little soothing. Cool. So let's try to give you guys a good break here. What, 48, 9:48? We'll pick back up again, okay? Yeah. Okay, so now we will be talking a little bit about blood vessels. So, talking about blood vessels, just various types here. You need to know a couple of properties about each one. So arteries, again, carry what kind of blood?
Blood away from the heart.
Nice. Blood away from the heart. That's a jacked up part. There we go. Here they have the highest velocity. Okay. Arteries carry blood away from the heart, and that's when blood is moving the fastest. Your arterioles, oh, this should ring a bell. Eels, what do you know about it?
They have smooth muscle.
Nice. Smooth muscle. Okay. And these have the highest resistance. They have the highest resistance. Okay. Your capillaries, that's your exchange site. Oop. Okay. This is, so let me see, exchange / diffuse gases. This is where we see the lowest velocity. Lowest velocity. Makes sense. You want your blood moving the slowest at your capillaries so you can move gases. Okay. Venules and veins, these are relatively just collecting pools. Okay. So what I'm getting at is your venules and your veins, they just collect blood. There's not a high amount of pressure. Things aren't moving very quickly. It's a very passive kind of process compared to your arterioles, your arteries, okay? So here's a nice little picture kind of summarizing all of that. The way I kind of think about this is the artery is like a highway. How fast do you typically go on a highway? We're talking about like opening it up. You're going past Fort Collins. How fast are you going?
Fast.
Yeah. I'm like, on a good day, what, 85? Try not to sound too irresponsible, right? So imagine you're going like 85 miles per hour on the highway, the artery, super fast. Your arterial, that's the exit ramp. You're going from 85 to 35. You're slowing down a lot. Agreed? You've lost, give or take, 50 miles per hour. From your arterioles to the capillaries, your capillaries, this is like the neighborhood roads. You're going from 35 to like 25. Yes, you're slowing down, but you're not slowing down as much. Okay, so your capillaries, that's kind of like the neighborhood. Okay. And then venules, veins, passive. So the three layers that are shared between both your veins and your arteries. Lumen, this is that inner space. Okay. Tunica intima. Tunica is kind of like your tunic, your clothes. Tunica intima, your intimates. Where do you wear your intimates? Hopefully your answer is on the inside. Right? I mean, you do you live your life however you want to do it. Ain't judging. So tunica intima, also known as your endothelium. Be careful, guys. Endothelium looks very similar to endocardium. What's the difference between endothelium and endocardium?
Like explain how we know the difference or what's the difference between them actually?
What's the actual difference between them?
The endothelium lines blood vessels and the endocardium lines the heart.
Be careful. Lots of students read way too quickly and mix those up. You are completely correct. Endothelium inside your vessels, endocardium inside your heart. Okay. Tunica media, that's your middle layer. That's going to play kind of a huge role with patho. And then tunica externa, or the adventitia, the outer layer. Okay. So you see all three layers, regardless of veins or arteries. So just kind of showing you, here's the cross section of the blood vessel. You got your endothelium, or your tunica interna, your adventitia, tunica externa. Everything in between, that's your tunica media. So which one's your thickest layer? Which one's going to be the thickest layer?
The media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Notice your media has that smooth muscle as well. So arteries, veins, same three layers. Same three layers. All right, so now we're going to start talking a little bit about fluid dynamics here. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into an engineering course yet. Okay. On the left here, we're talking about differences in diameter. So in terms of, let me say, diameter. If I increase the diameter, do I move more or less fluid?
More.
More. I can move more fluid with a greater diameter because there is less resistance. Okay, think about like a highway. You know, if you want to go down a highway at 85, you better hope it's a 4-lane highway, 6-lane highway. You are not doing that on a single lane highway, right? Just other people kind of are slow. Therefore, if you decrease the diameter, what should happen to your resistance? Yep, should increase. Cool. Now, on the other side, this is a graph of velocity. So graph of how fast blood is moving. Okay, reiterating here at the aorta. The aorta has the highest velocity. So that's when blood is moving the fastest. At your arterioles, if you notice here, if you take the derivative of that slope, you're going to see that's the greatest change. So what I'm saying is your arterioles, have the highest resistance. Your arterioles have the highest resistance, i.e., at your arterioles, that's when it slows down the most. You can see that we start tanking speed really quickly. Okay. And then capillaries. They have the lowest velocity. Again, recapping why. Why do your capillaries have the lowest velocity?
So you can do gas exchange.
Perfect. Yeah, gas exchange. Allow for gas diffusion. All right. So your heart is directly connected to your arteries. but your veins, they don't have pressure behind it. So how do we move blood through the veins? There's two methods for moving blood in the veins. There's two ways to move blood throughout your veins. Again, because there's not any pressure, okay? First up is these one-way valves. One-way valves. Okay, so notice your one-way valves, oh, actually, they only allow blood to move one direction. If blood tries to move the opposite direction, it just gets stuck at the bottom here. Okay. Question for you. Where are we trying to move all of this blood? So where in your veins, we see these one-way valves. What are we constantly trying to move blood towards?
Is it the lungs?
Close.
The heart.
Move it towards the heart. One-way valves ensure blood only moves to the heart. Okay. You don't want blood just pooling in your legs, right? That's bad. Second method is you have a muscle skeletal pump. So you got blood inside of your vein. Once you contract your muscles, that pushes blood through those one-way valves, okay? And then your one-way valves shut to prevent blood from going backwards. So musculoskeletal pump moves blood past the valves. Okay, so a little bit of an application here. Anyone ever been to a Catholic wedding? Maybe, no? All right. Super, super fun. Highly recommend it if you have 12 hours of nothing to do. They are so long. In a Catholic wedding, everyone's standing. You guys have probably seen those videos like on TikTok or the Vine. When somebody stands for so long, they fall over, they collapse. You guys have seen those videos like where the groomsmen just totally eat shit, right? Why? What's the issue if you stand in place for so long?
Because their muscles aren't contracting to move the blood up, so it's just pooling in their legs.
Exactly. The blood's just pooling in their legs, less blood up here, less blood for the brain, thud. So, as nurses, do you need to worry about passing out while standing? Kind of, but I mean, nurses, are you guys just standing in one place for 12 hours? Not usually, right? So therefore, with you walking around, walking is probably the best muscle skeletal pump, okay? Now, have you walked recently? Oh, some of you have. Well, I've been sitting here because I'm lazy. Why have I not passed out? Why haven't you passed out?
Because you're sitting down.
I'm sitting down, but the blood's still pooling in my legs. Gravity sucks. What are you doing right now 10 to 20 times a minute?
Breathing.
Yeah. When you breathe, your chest cavity expanding and contracting, that's also another muscle skeletal pump. So that helps you keep circulating your blood. Okay. All right. So a couple of things that affect blood flow. First up is pressure. Pressure is defined as the force exerted by a fluid on the area, i.e., this is how hard the blood pushes on the vessel. Okay. Pressure is how hard is the blood pushing on the vessel. All right. Resistance. So this is actually a really key important part here. Resistance. Two things change resistance: diameter and length. We've talked a little bit about diameter. If you increase the diameter, what happens to resistance? Yeah, decreases. Nice. Versus decreasing the diameter, I will increase the resistance. Length. What do you guys think about length? If I increase length, does that increase or decrease resistance?
Decreases it.
Decreases it, decreases it. You guys ever remember crazy straws? Crazy straws, where like your straw was so long, it could be like a pair of glasses. Anybody still have theirs? No, you guys got rid of them?
I might have one hiding somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised.
Usually most people don't have them readily available because they were terrible to use. They were so terrible to use because they were so long. The longer something is, the harder it is to move. So another example, what kind of commute would you rather have? A 5-minute commute or a 2-hour commute? 5 minutes. The shorter the distance, the less the resistance. So if you increase length, you increase resistance. So that's the big difference here between diameter and length. Decrease length, you don't have to go as far, there's less resistance. So let's kind of give this some more practical application here. Who lives longer, tall people or short people?
Short people?
Short people live longer.
That's good
So
news
you
for
guys,
me.
yeah. Yeah, rub it in my face. It's fine. You guys have actually seen me. You guys know I'm 6 foot tall. Why am I more likely to die sooner than you guys? Why
Your
is my
blood
lifespan?
vessels are longer, so there's more resistance.
Exactly. I have a longer blood vessel circuit. I have more length. I have more resistance. Therefore, which organ has to work harder in my case?
Your heart.
Heart. Yeah. So that's why you guys are going to live longer than me, amongst other reasons. My heart has to work harder to overcome that resistance of being so much further away. Okay. Right. So let's see. We can see your brain cause vasoconstriction or vasodilation. Okay, makes sense. Your baroreceptors, these detect pressure. These are involved in a simple reflex arc. So your baroreceptors are pressure receptors inside of your blood vessels. Now, take for example, right now, I'm assuming you guys are all sitting, right? If I count 1, 2, 3, and I need you to stand up as soon as possible. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Boom, you stand up. Anybody gonna pass out? No. Why? If you're sitting down right now and you stand up as fast as you can, all of your blood goes down to your lower half. Why don't you pass out? What happens is that blood enters your legs and stretches out your blood vessels. That's detected by your baroreceptors. Signal goes to your spinal cord. Spinal cord says, hey, vasoconstrict, get that blood back up. Okay, that's what I mean by that simple reflex arc. In health assessment, do you guys learn about the sit-stand test yet? Sit, stand test, you have somebody sit and stand as fast as they can in 10 times and you time it. You're testing their simple reflexes. You're testing their simple reflexes. You're trying to see, can their spinal cord keep up with the rest of their body? Okay, so just a little bit of application there. Chemoreceptors, saying like it can respond to like things like epinephrine. Okay. Okay, so a couple of things that affect blood flow still. Keep going on about it. All right, so there's two types of flow, laminar and turbulent. Up top is laminar and below is turbulent. Okay. So what do you guys notice is the big difference between laminar and turbulent flow?
You have a consistent diameter and laminar flow.
Nice. Yeah. Very good eye. You have a consistent diameter. Very good. Laminar flow, more arrows pointed in one direction means you have less resistance. You can move more blood. Turbulent flow, therefore, on the other hand, has the high resistance. So, what causes turbulent flow?
The change
That's right.
from artery to arterial or to smaller vessels.
Yeah. When you're going from an artery to an arterial, great. Or if you're vasoconstricting. So when you lose diameter, that causes turbulence. You get less flow. Therefore, where would you see the greatest amount of turbulent flow? Where would we see the greatest amount of turbulent flow?
In the limbs?
Close. It's in, sorry, I should specify in which vessel, which blood vessel. Sorry.
Arterioles.
Yeah. You should see the greatest turbulence at the arterioles. Okay. Because that's when you're losing the most diameter. Oh boy. All right, everybody, deep breath. All right, so this is how we calculate blood pressure. Okay. So this right here is known as the Colebrook equation. Okay. Colebrook equation is how we calculate pressure inside of a blood vessel. In order to use the Colebrook equation, you need to define some variables. Up top, R sub E, this is your coefficient. This is usually determined by the kind of fluid you are moving. This right here is your inner diameter. So a little geometry, nothing too crazy. Q, we've talked about, that is perfusion. That is how we describe viscosity. Okay. H sub M is a property of the tube, talking about what we're trying to flow through. All right. I'm going to keep going and you're going to plug that in and yeah, I'm just shitting you guys. And you guys still really trust me too much, don't you?
No, I knew you weren't going to do that. That's why I wasn't writing anything down.
Oh, so maybe I should pull out the Colebrook equation.
I think we all
No.
would be screwed because our prereqs were only like basic algebra and stuff like that. So we
This is just basic algebra. You're fine. I
Yeah,
wasn't
no.
lying about the variables. You guys could plug that in. It's not bad. But no, don't worry. I'm just joking with you guys. You do not need to know the Colebrook equation. You straight up do not need to worry about the Colebrook equation. I actually think it's fascinating. This is one equation out of 200 different equations you can use to calculate pressure inside of a blood vessel. Is this easy? No, no. Proud of you, Alexis. You're gonna want to keep that handy for farm. Just saying. This is the math you guys need to do. It's not even math. I'm not even giving you numbers. This is how we can approximate pressures, okay? So I'll give you guys some examples here, but what I'm saying is these are the equations you need to know, but there will be no numbers behind it. You don't need a calculator. I was just messing with you guys. Okay. I'm really hoping you guys don't trust me so much in the future. All right, so easy enough. BP, that's going to be blood pressure. CO, cardiac output. PR is peripheral resistance. Okay. You can also see it as TPR, total peripheral resistance. I usually stick with PR. Okay. Cardiac output, we already know. HR, heart rate. SV is stroke volume. Okay. So if I haven't completely terrified you of math, you can use a little algebra here. You can rearrange this into one equation. Okay. You can rearrange that into one equation. So what will you be doing with this stuff? Let me give you some examples. During exercise, we see an increase in blood pressure. Why? So in exercise, we see an increase in blood pressure because which variable is increasing?
Your heart rate.
Heart
So
rate, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your heart rate, absolutely. Okay. So that should be kind of self-explanatory. Heart rate is heart rate. Stroke volume, this is the amount of blood that your heart pumps out. Okay. Your stroke volume is the amount of blood that your heart pumps out. Can you change the size of your heart very quickly? No. So therefore, what I'm getting at is your stroke volume doesn't really change. Unless you can change the size of your heart, your stroke volume doesn't really change. Okay. Peripheral resistance. Be careful here. If I vasoconstrict, does that increase or decrease my resistance?
Increases.
Increases, I agree. Be careful. It's kind of unintuitive. Make the blood vessels smaller, resistance goes up. If you vasodilate, that will decrease your peripheral resistance. Okay. Okay. Another example. Type 1 hypersensitivity. We see a drop in blood pressure. Why?
Because the release of histamine causes the vessels to vasodilate.
Nice. Decrease in the peripheral resistance secondary to that histamine. Okay, second part. How do we compensate? How do we compensate for that drop in blood pressure? How do we try to increase blood pressure? How do we try to maintain blood pressure?
Elevated heart rate.
Elevate the heart rate. Awesome. So this is what I'm talking about with these equations. Not really necessarily math, but if you decrease one, how does it affect the other side? If you want to maintain blood pressure, how do you do it, okay? And stroke volume doesn't really change. We'll talk about changing stroke volume when we hit patho, okay? Is this math a little bit easier? So just reiterating, hey, your blood pressure is cardiac output multiplied by peripheral resistance. All right. So cardiac output. What were the two things that give us cardiac output?
Heart rate and stroke volume.
Nice. Heart rate and stroke volume. Okay, very good. Two things that can also change cardiac output, but there's not really a variable that we plug into the equation for. Preload and afterload. So preload is basically how much blood can the heart suck in? How much blood can the heart suck in? Okay, so thinking about this here, the more blood your heart can suck in, the more blood your heart can pump out. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The more blood your heart can suck in, the more it can pump out, good or bad?
I'm feeling like it's bad because I feel like if you overfill the heart, then it's going to lose like elasticity.
Nice. It can be if you overfill, but that's why we have our pericardium to prevent that overfilling, right? So take, for example, let me rephrase this here. Michael Phelps, you guys probably heard of the dude. Michael Phelps has a huge preload. His heart sucks in a lot of blood. That means his heart can pump out a lot of blood. What does that do for athletic performance? Jacks it up. So generally, preload. So let me say, ideally, you want a high preload because that's going to give you a high cardiac output. Okay, but yes, you can actually end up overfilling. Afterload, this is the resistance to getting blood out of the heart. Okay. So afterload is the resistance of getting blood out of the heart. So ideally, do you want a high or low afterload? Do you want to be hard or easy to eject blood?
Low.
You want a low afterload. Okay. low afterload will increase cardiac output. Be careful here. Students confuse preload and afterload a lot. Preload is how much blood. Preload is a volume. Afterload is a pressure. Okay. So just be careful there. These are two different things. They're not both volume. They're not both pressure. Okay. One's a volume, one's a pressure. So cardiac output, stroke volume times heart rate. Your preload and your afterload can also kind of change things a little bit, but there's no variable. What other factors can regulate blood pressure? This stuff here, we're not going to get into this stuff quite yet. This is exam 5 stuff. So don't worry yet. Okay. But this is saying blood volume. Blood volume. If you increase your blood volume, what does that do to blood pressure? If we doubled the amount of blood inside of you right now, what would your blood pressure be?
Higher.
Yep. More volume, more pressure. Less volume, less pressure. That's what that slide's trying to get at. Okay. I'm just gonna say like to this, like, because we already talked about it, right? Your heart can beat on its own, but if your brain wants to, it can tell it to beat faster or slower. All right. Myocardial contractility. This is basically how hard does the heart contract? How hard does the heart contract? Stroke volume. If you increase stroke volume, you have to increase contractility. If you increase stroke volume, you have to increase contractility. What do I mean by this? If you increase the amount of blood that your heart sucks in, it has to beat harder to get it out. You guys have ever heard of the saying, you bite off more than you can chew? Let's just say you take a huge bite out of a burrito, breakfast burrito, because that sounds delicious. You take a big bite out of a breakfast burrito. The bigger the bite, what happens to your ability to chew? It goes down. The bigger the bite, you can't actually chew. Same thing with the heart. The more blood, your heart can't actually contract, okay? Inotropic agents, these are things like epinephrine / norepinephrine. That will increase contractility. Okay. Oxygen and CO2 levels, you don't need to worry about. I'm going to explain it, but you're going to see why you don't need to actually worry about this. Okay. If someone's sitting at like less than 50% SpO2, this actually decreases contractility. So Madeline, actually, this goes all the way back to your original, one of your original questions at the very beginning. If your oxygen saturation is low, your heart can't actually contract. Patient comes in with an SpO2 or oxygen saturation of 50%. Is the first question you're going to ask, what's their heart contractility? No? ABCs, right? That's why I'm saying you don't need to worry about it. Okay. Mean arterial pressure. This is just the average pressure in all of the arteries. So mean arterial pressure is just the average pressure in all of the arteries. A couple of different ways to calculate it. I'm not going to give you numbers to calculate, but if you're curious, diastole counts twice as much as systole because 2/3 of the cardiac cycle is spent in diastole. So again, you don't need to calculate this. I'm not asking you to know the formula here. What I am more concerned with is this range. Okay. i.e., if your MAP is greater than 110. So let's think about this. If your blood pressure is stupid high, what is your concern? What are you worried about?
CVA.
Strokes, absolutely. What else are you worried about?
Tissue perfusion?
Say again?
Tissue perfusion?
That's the opposite side. If there's not enough pressure. Here, blood just going super fast.
Heart attack?
Heart attack, yeah. Aneurysms, anyone? Bleeding. Okay. So if your MAP is above 110, hey, you're looking at death. If your MAP is below 70, now this is where your blood pressure is so low, you don't have any perfusion. And what's another term for decreased perfusion?
Hypoxia.
Ischemia, hypoxia. So again, I ask you, what is the big concern with a low MAP?
Necrosis.
Yeah, let's see. So either way, blood pressure too high, blood pressure too low, you're looking at death. Okay, one's going to be a little bit more violent than the other one. All right. And then the last slide here is just circulation because, hey, we're talking about blood vessels. You got to talk about your lymphatics. There are 3 functions of the lymphatic system. Totally fine, totally fine. Hope the guy's okay. 3 functions of the lymphatic system. Thankfully, you already know 2. So a little bit of head scratching here. What was the function of the lymphatic system during exam 1? What did your lymphatic system do during exam 1?
Your immune system.
Nice. Immunity. This is where your B and T cells mature. Second function happened during the second exam. Anybody remember what did the lymphatic system do during exam 2?
It picks up that 10% of
Nice.
fluids.
Yeah, you got it. Fluid balance. It picked up that 10%. Third function here is that it's going to circulate lipids. Okay. Can I just dump lipids, i.e. fats, into my blood? Why not? Why can't I just dump lipids into my bloodstream? Why do I need a whole different system to circulate lipids?
They're sticky, so they'll cause
Yeah.
clogs.
And lipids and water, they don't mix. Yeah. Awesome. So, afferent vessels carry unfiltered fluid. Efferent is going to be filtered fluid. And then your lymph nodes, these are your actual filter units, your filters. Okay. So just kind of having an idea of that, we'll talk more about them. Unit 5, Unit 4, Unit 4. Okay. Voila, that is Cardiophys. Yeah. So let's see. When I see you guys Monday, that we'll do cardiopath, and then that's the cutoff for exam 3. Okay. Yeah. I'll be hanging out if anybody has any questions. I'll get this lecture uploaded, today. Let me know if you guys need to meet to talk about your exam. And if not, everybody, good luck. Holy cow, good luck on, actually, I'll see you guys before then, but hey, good luck in health assessment anyhow. Yeah. Have a good weekend. Stay warm. Oh, great question. I kind of want to do class on Monday. What do you guys want to do?